was sitting in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, staring at a bank notification that made my stomach drop. Account balance $347, that was it. That was everything I had left. I remember whispering, no, this has to be a mistake, even though deep down, I already knew it wasn't. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around my lungs and pulled as hard as they could. I refreshed the app. Same number. I checked another account, empty. Another one. Closed. That was the moment my life officially fell apart. And the worst part? The person who did this to me was my own father. Can you even imagine realizing that the man who raised you, the man who taught you to be honest and do the right thing, had been quietly committing fraud in your name for years? Because I couldn't. Not at first. I refused to. Growing up, my dad was the kind of man everyone trusted. He was charming, well-spoken, always helping neighbors with paperwork, taxes, business forms. People admired him. I admired him. He used to joke that numbers were his superpower, and I believed him. So when I turned 18 and he said, "Let me help you set up your finances properly. I don't want you making the same mistakes I did," I felt lucky. I signed where he told me to sign. Opened accounts he said were smart for my future. Trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. The first red flag came years later. A strange phone call from a bank asking about a loan I'd supposedly taken out. I laughed and told them there must be some mistake. I'd never taken a loan in my life. They didn't laugh. They started listing dates, amounts, my social security number. That night, I confronted my dad casually, still in denial, still hoping for an innocent explanation. He didn't even look surprised. He smiled. And that smile, that's when fear finally crept in. He told me I was overreacting, that it was temporary, that he was handling something and everything would be fine soon. He spoke slowly, calmly, like I was a child throwing a tantrum over nothing. I wanted to believe him. I shouldn't have, because while I was trusting him, he was draining me, maxing out credit lines, moving money, opening accounts I didn't even know existed, all under my name. By the time I understood the full picture, my credit was destroyed, my savings gone, and my future hanging by a thread. And my father? He acted like I owed him an apology for questioning him. That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, coldly. I stopped crying, I stopped arguing, and I started planning. Because if he thought I was just going to let this go, he had no idea who he'd just turned me into. I didn't confront him again after that night. Not because I forgave him, but because I finally understood something terrifying. If my own father could lie that easily to my face, then I didn't know him at all. So instead of arguing, I did something he never expected. I went quiet. On the outside, I played the role he wanted. I nodded when he said, "Trust me." I pretended to calm down. I even apologized once, and I still remember the way his shoulders relaxed when I did. The way his guard dropped. Inside, though, my mind was racing. I started with my credit report. The moment I pulled it up, I felt physically sick. There were accounts I had never opened, credit cards maxed out to the limit, personal loans taken out years ago, late payments stacked on top of each other like a crime scene timeline, all connected to me. Every single one. My credit score wasn't just bad. It was destroyed. This wasn't one mistake. This wasn't temporary. This was a system. I remember sitting on my bed at 3 a.m., laptop glowing in the dark, scrolling through page after page of damage, realizing how carefully he'd done this, how methodical, how confident. He hadn't panicked because he never thought I'd check. That's when the anger hit. Not explosive anger, but something sharper. Colder. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing slowed. I wasn't dealing with a desperate man. I was dealing with a man who thought he was untouchable. The more I dug, the worse it got. I found emails I'd never seen, mail forwarded to his address, bank notifications rerouted to his phone number. He had slowly replaced my contact information with his. One form at a time, one signature at a time. Using my identity like it was his personal safety net. And suddenly, so many memories clicked into place. Why he always insisted on handling paperwork for me. Why he got irritated whenever I asked questions. Why he told me credit was overrated and not to worry about it. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. The breaking point came when I realized he had taken out a loan using my name, after I'd already started struggling financially. He watched me stress, watched me cry about bills, watched me skip meals, and still kept stealing. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom, slid down against the door, and finally let myself sob. Not because of the money, but because the man I loved as my father never existed. I felt stupid, used, small. But somewhere in the middle of that breakdown, another thought surfaced, quiet, dangerous, and empowering. He taught me everything he knows. He taught me how systems work, how paperwork moves, how institutions protect themselves. And suddenly, I realized something else. If he could build this lie so carefully, I could dismantle it the same way, piece by piece. So I started documenting everything. Screenshots, dates, account numbers, recorded conversations, always legal, always careful. I called banks pretending to be confused, letting them explain everything while I listened. And every time they talked, the evidence stacked higher. What shocked me the most wasn't the fraud. It was his confidence. He was still living comfortably, still giving advice to others, still acting like the smartest man in every room, while my life burned quietly in the background. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let him dig himself deeper, and then hand him the shovel he'd used against me. Because when this came crashing down, it needed to be undeniable and irreversible. The twist didn't come with a dramatic confession or a slammed door. It came quietly, the way real damage always does. A few weeks after I started gathering evidence, my dad invited me out for coffee. That alone should have raised alarms. He never invited me anywhere unless he needed something. Still, I went, smiling, calm, playing the role he expected. He chose a small cafe he liked, one where the baristas knew him by name. He sat across from me, relaxed, stirring his drink like this was just another normal day. Then he said it. So, I might need you to sign a few things again. Just some routine updates. My stomach flipped, but my face didn't change. That was the moment I realized he still thought I was under control. I asked what the papers were for. He waved it off casually, saying it was just to move things around, and that I'd thank him later. The arrogance in his voice made my skin crawl. But instead of refusing, I smiled. Okay, I said, send them to me. His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised but pleased. He leaned back in his chair like a man who'd just won something. Like a gambler doubling down because he'd never lost before. That's when I knew he hadn't changed. He hadn't stopped, and he definitely hadn't learned. What he didn't know was that I'd already spoken to a fraud specialist, that I'd learned exactly how these cases collapse when one wrong move is made, and that asking me to sign again, after I knew, crossed a legal line he couldn't undo. That night, when the documents hit my inbox, I didn't open them right away. I forwarded them to myself, to a secure drive, to an attorney, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. A few days later, I tested him. I mentioned casually that I was thinking about applying for a new apartment. He stiffened almost instantly. The tiniest pause, the slightest tightening of his jaw. What for? He asked too quickly. I shrugged. Just want to move forward with my life. He laughed, but his eyes didn't. He started talking fast, about timing, about patience, about how now wasn't the right moment. He even warned me not to let landlords check my credit. That was it. That was the proof I needed. He wasn't just hiding what he'd done. He was actively trapping me. And suddenly, I saw him clearly. Not as my father, but as a man terrified of losing control. A man who knew that the moment I became independent, everything he'd built on my identity would collapse. So I made a decision. I was going to give him exactly what he wanted, access. I signed nothing new, but I told him I was open to working together again. I let him believe I was scared, overwhelmed, dependent. He relaxed even more, started bragging. He told me stories about people he'd outsmarted over the years, about how banks never look too closely, about how the system rewards confidence. I recorded everything, and the scariest part, he still thought he was the smartest person in the room. That's when I set the final stage, because once someone believes they've already won, they stop watching their back. The first crack in his confidence was so small, I almost missed it. He called me one afternoon, voice tight, pretending to sound casual. Hey, quick question. Have you talked to anyone at your bank recently? My heart pounded, but my tone stayed light. Yeah, I said. Why? There was a pause. Just a beat too long. Oh, no reason, he replied. Just curious. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, realizing something important had shifted. He was checking on me now. That same week I made my first real move. Not dramatic, not explosive. Official. I filed an identity theft report. Saying those words out loud felt unreal, like I was accusing a stranger, not my own father. But once the report was submitted, the process moved fast. Banks froze accounts. Creditors flagged transactions. Questions started appearing where there had once been blind trust. And suddenly his world began to wobble. He started texting more, asking vague questions, fishing for information. Every message sounded polite on the surface, but underneath it was panic. Did anyone contact you? Did you get any letters? Don't worry if things seem weird for a bit. Weird. That's what he called the consequences of years of fraud. A few days later, I got my first call from a fraud investigator. Calm, professional, focused. They asked me to walk through my timeline, when accounts were opened, who had access, where mail was sent. I told the truth, all of it, and the more I spoke, the more surreal it felt. Hearing my own story reflected back to me in clinical terms made it clear just how severe this was. This wasn't a family disagreement. This was a crime. The investigator asked one question that stuck with me. Has the individual who did this ever asked you to sign documents recently? I swallowed. Yes. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. That helps, they said quietly. That night, my dad showed up at my door unannounced. I watched him through the peephole before opening it. The same man I'd known my whole life, now pacing slightly, jaw clenched, smile forced into place. He hugged me too tightly. Too long. You okay? He asked. You've seemed distant. I nodded, letting him talk. He rambled about banks being incompetent, about paperwork errors, about how people overreact to technical issues. He was trying to rewrite the narrative, but then he slipped. He mentioned an account number. One I'd never said out loud, my pulse spiked. I looked at him carefully, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face when he realized what he'd just done. That's when I knew. He knew I knew. The next morning, he called me 6 times before noon. I didn't answer. By evening, his tone changed completely. The messages turned emotional. Apologetic, confusing. I was just trying to help. You don't understand how hard things were. I did this for the family. For the family. That phrase made my stomach twist. Because while he was sending those messages, I was sitting in a quiet office, signing paperwork to officially dispute every single fraudulent account, one by one. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, and somewhere I knew he felt it. Because when control slips away, panic takes its place. I knew it was coming before it happened. The shift from confidence to fear always follows the same pattern: denial, anger, bargaining. And my father was moving through it faster than I ever expected. The call came late at night. Not a text, not a casual check-in. A call. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. His voice cracked immediately. We need to talk, he said, not calmly, not carefully, urgently. Please. I met him the next day in the same cafe where he'd once asked me to sign those documents. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of us. This time he didn't order anything. His hands shook as he sat across from me. I know things look bad, he started quickly. But you have to understand. If this goes any further, it'll destroy everything. I stayed silent. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like the walls might be listening. You can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Families handle things internally. There it was, the first attempt to make me responsible for protecting him. I asked him one question. Why didn't you ever tell me? His mouth opened. Opened again. He didn't answer. Instead, he got defensive. Told me I was being dramatic. Accused me of betraying him. Said I was ungrateful after everything he'd done for me. I felt something strange then. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. I told him about the investigator, the reports, the documentation. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized how deep this had gone. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Please, he whispered, I'll pay it back. I'll fix your credit, just stop this. That was the moment it finally clicked for him. He had no power left. I gently pulled my hand away and said something I'd practiced in my head 100 times. You already had years to fix this, he cried. I don't mean quiet tears. I mean shaking, humiliating sobs that turned heads in the cafe. He talked about stress, about fear, about how he never meant to hurt me. And maybe, on some level, that was true. But intent doesn't erase impact. I stood up, looked down at him, and said the hardest thing I've ever said. I'm not destroying you. I'm just not saving you. I walked out without looking back. 2 weeks later, the consequences landed. Accounts were officially charged back. Investigations widened. His financial access was frozen. People started asking questions he couldn't dodge anymore. Family members called me. Some angry, some confused, some quietly supportive. I told the truth. I didn't soften it. I didn't exaggerate it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't protect him. Because protecting him had nearly destroyed me. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It unraveled, slowly, publicly, irreversibly. First came the official letters. Thick envelopes with formal language and no emotion. The kind that signal the end of denial. His accounts stayed frozen. His business advice clients quietly disappeared. The people who once praised his intelligence stopped returning his calls. Then came the consequences he couldn't control. An audit turned into a deeper investigation. Questions expanded beyond my name. Patterns emerged. And suddenly I wasn't the only one. That's when reality finally crushed him. He tried calling again. I didn't answer. He left voicemails instead. Rambling, apologetic, desperate. Not the confident man who once smiled while destroying my future, but someone smaller. Afraid. I never thought it would go this far, he said in one message, voice barely holding together. That line stuck with me, because it confirmed everything. He never thought about me going this far. He never imagined consequences and only comfort. Months passed. My credit slowly started to recover. Disputes were resolved. Fraud markers were cleared. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward instead of drowning. One afternoon, I ran into him unexpectedly. He looked older, thinner. His posture, once so assured, was collapsed inward, like the weight of his own actions had finally caught up to him. He didn't approach me right away. When he finally did, his voice was quiet. I lost everything, he said. Not accusing, just stating a fact. I looked at him and felt nothing. No triumph, no hatred, just distance. I know, I replied. He waited. Maybe for forgiveness. Maybe for comfort. I gave him neither. I hope you understand some